Is additions, deletions?
Are your microphones on?
They are now.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Motion carried. Is Cheryl and Todd here?
Yeah.
Why don't you come on up and sit in this chair here? And if you don't mind, just explain to us what you're trying to do.
Sure. So I am trying to put an addition on my home for my parents. The structure of my home does not have any bedrooms on the bottom floor. My parents are elderly and I'm planning for care. They're healthy right now, thank God, but they are aging and I'd like to have them accessible so that because I will be their primary caregiver. So I'm looking to put a a single story addition on for them off the side of the southern side of the house.
Now, if I look at the application,
Mhm.
it looks like the addition you want to put on is like a separate apartment. It's going to have a kitchen, bedroom, closets, all that stuff.
Right.
Now, you say this is for your parents?
Mhm.
What happens if something happens to your parents? What do you intend to do with it?
I don't want to think about that, but yes, I know. No, and I know long-term down the road, I mean, it's just me. I have no idea what I would do down the road. I'm hoping that they have a long life.
Okay. I do too.
But again, because they don't need the immediate care, but I'd like to transition them into my residence sooner rather than later.
Yep.
They would like their own, space, some privacy. So that was why the addition, including the kitchen, so that they could have their own.
And you understand, if we grant you what you're looking for, you're also going to have to go to the planning board. The site plan review and special permit from them.
Yes.
I took a look at the application. There are several things going on here. One, the lot's undersized for the RL5 district, which is 5 acres. The applicant only has 4.89. So one-story addition. The addition is going to increase the size of the house by 73%, which is big. You're allowed to increase it 25%. Have you looked at whether or not you could reduce the size of this, or is this the bare minimum that you're looking for? Because I also see you have an office there. What's that for?
My mom to do her crafts and puzzles and things like that. She
Okay.
likes her own sort of space away.
And 2 bathrooms. You need 2 bathrooms for your parents?
I like their separate space.
She said they like separate bathrooms.
Obviously this is, the ideal. So I went with what would be the ideal setup for them. And so I guess then I would say what are the modifications that would be necessary in order for them to still maintain their privacy while they're, they have the ability to do so.
How old are your parents, if you don't mind me asking?
76 and 74.
Right. They got a lot of years left.
Yes, they do.
Where do they live now?
They live over in Salt Point, but the house is rather large and it
Okay.
only
So
has
they're gonna
bedrooms.
sell that house and then move in with you?
Mhm.
Any board members have any questions or comments regarding the application?
I had a question about the accessory use,
Mhm.
in terms of, why is this considered an accessory use in terms of the application?
Because it's not going to be used by the applicant. It's accessory because they're creating another apartment onto the house.
But does it matter, like, under one taxation?
Well, the assessor would probably
No,
increase the value. I don't think I understand what your question is.
I guess I'm just wondering, like, this makes sense to me that somebody would want to add on to their house. It's one family. It's not like she's renting this out to a separate entity where it's an accessory use. It's all one family under one roof.
Well, technically it is,
Yeah.
but it also is not too. They're not on, well, since they're not really part of the immediate family.
They are immediate. I mean, your parents are your immediate family.
Well-
I guess I'm just trying to understand the basis of the application in terms of that.
Well, under the code, this fits the definition of an
Did you
accessory
bring a
apartment.
hard copy of this?
I
like,
do.
I
Yes,
thought
I
it
do.
I
was
couldn't see it on
if-
my computer.
If it was, trying to pull up his, and I think, some of the other things apply, the lot coverage and all of that.
Yeah.
But the special use permit is because, and that really would just be a matter of, the planning board approving that, right?
Well, we also have to issue a special permit too.
For the use.
Yep.
Okay.
They need a special permit for increasing beyond the 25%.
Right. That's the zoning.
Right.
Yep.
And then, we need a variance to construct the accessory housing on an undersized lot.
Right, and then they also have the setback issue.
Yeah.
The setback issue though, is that primarily onto the road?
Yeah, actually, the existing house is 65 and a half feet from the road now.
And the addition would
addition's
be
gonna-
less.
Right.
Or less of an encroachment, it's greater.
Mhm.
The distance is greater,
Yes,
but we still have to grant that, right?
correct.
So, yeah, I, it's the lot coverage.
Which is an additional 1,500 square feet.
What's the size of the?
It's
current house?
17.
15, just around. It's
Yeah,
on.
that's right. I
And
don't
if
think
the
it's,
zoning, if the zoning is approved, part of the reason, Frank, I'm asking the question that I'm asking is because of exactly what you raised at the beginning. Granting this zoning variance so that her parents can live there, it seems to me, and it falls under one person, one applicant, one
Well,
owner.
good, but this,
Right.
the addition is created as a separate house.
Yeah, so it falls under code section 16541,
Okay.
which is accessory residential housing. And it says the town finds that the creation of an accessory attached
Mhm.
housing is consistent with the maintenance of the rural character. So that's where it's permitted, as a permitted use. But it's subject to a special permit.
Okay. But doesn't it say something about more than one family?
That's a separate definition. That's not necessarily, yes, if you're talking about a multifamily, that's a separate definition
Okay.
for that. type.
The reason I'm asking this question is exactly what Frank was getting at the beginning, which is, this seems somewhat reasonable to ask for what she's asking for, but should she sell the house, the next occupant can use it very differently, right?
Well, they
And
couldn't
so-
use it, not necessarily, I mean, they couldn't necessarily just simply use it as a rental or anything, I mean, that would be a different use.
Okay, so we're granting the use under accessory.
160, exactly.
Okay,
And looking at the site plan, this isn't going towards any neighbors or any other
It's on the other side.
houses. It's on the
Yeah.
other side.
Just to clarify something, so if the house were to be sold, if they wanted to make rental unit out of it or whatever else, they would have to come to the planning board and make those changes, which would not be our applicant's concern.
That's correct.
Okay,
legally do that, yeah.
and you're good with that? You're not, okay.
I'm not looking. No, yes, thank you.
I also want to point out too that our board member Katie Briggs is absent However, our alternate is here, and we're going to have him join in deliberations for this one. All right.
I don't have any.
Okay. Anybody else?
I have no further questions.
Okay. All right. I guess the existing house is 2,300 square feet. You're adding about 1,700 square feet. So you're only permitted to go 25% over what you have. So you're going to need an area variance of 48% to bring it up to what you're looking to do. So I think what we'll do is let's just take these items one by one. Let's tackle the undersized lot. This is a non-conforming lot. You're allowed to expand it up to 25%. The proposal before us is to increase the size of the house by 1,710 square feet, which is an increase of 48%. That's going to require special permit. So I would make a motion that we grant the special permit. Actually, it's an area variance. I'm sorry, it's an area variance. So I would make a motion that we grant the area variance, allowing the addition to the house of 1,710 square feet. So the area variance required is for 48%.
Hold the
Yeah.
phone. We've got to, two things. We've got to type it. Secret.
Yeah,
And I do believe you have to send it for a public hearing first.
okay.
It-
First, we're going to do the public hearing.
Okay.
Make a motion that we open public hearing.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Anybody here wish to speak for or against the application?
No. Was the hearing notice for today? Was there a public hearing notice for today?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
Anybody here to speak for or against it? No? Make a motion to close the public hearing.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. First, let's do seeker. There's the application here is considered type 2 under seeker, requiring no further environmental review. I would make a motion that we declare this to be a type 2 action under seeker. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any further discussion on the application?
It does seem like the spaces are large. So I am just looking at the bathrooms, right? Is it because you want them to be handicap accessible? Could you make one handicap accessible and not the other? The office is larger than the bedroom. So I think just, I do feel like you could tighten the plan up a little bit. But I don't know how others feel about that.
Well, what would you have in mind? Do you have any suggestions or?
Yeah, I'm looking at like the bathrooms, right? It's just, they're very large. They are probably about, I'm gonna guess just from measurements I'm seeing, yeah. The bathrooms are 12 by 6. Right? And,
Looks like it.
yeah, so, that's a pretty large bathroom. And then the office I'm looking at, the office is bigger than the bedroom. And I'm just questioning that, that's a large, to have the crafts room larger than the bedroom. I think it
Yeah.
would just help you
Mhm.
to tighten up the plan so that you're not asking for quite as much. In terms of,
And have you looked into is your septic system
yeah,
adequate to handle the other two
Yeah.
bathrooms?
I
and
think that's only provided that the office area stays an office.
Correct,
If you ever
Yeah.
convert that to a bedroom, you've got a
Yes.
problem.
correct.
And like the one bathroom is en suite and the other one is not.
Right.
And you're saying they like their privacy, so that's kind of counterintuitive, but
Bathroom privacy.
no, I get it, but
Yeah, no, I hear you.
in the middle of the night, I don't think they're going out of the bedroom to go to the bathroom. So, I don't know,
Sure.
but
Mhm. Okay.
I just, my suggestion to you would be to take another look at how this really lays out for them in terms of what they really need. That's my only comment.
How's the rest of the board feel?
I'm in favor of granting the variance.
I am too. I think just taking a family member and moving them into a new addition, how, if you don't mind me asking, what square footage are they going from now into?
Significantly larger. They're on almost a 7-acre plot with a 4-bedroom,
Okay,
2-level house that my dad built.
okay.
So they're reducing the size.
Yeah, so that's a big difference.
Significantly, yes.
If we impose a condition that if something happened where your parents are no longer living
Mhm.
and you want to do something with the space, you'd have to come back to us.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Mhm.
Anybody else? All right. Well, the first thing we'll look at is an area variance for increasing the lot size. Under the code, she's permitted to increase a non-conforming lot up to 25%. She's seeking to increase that by an additional 48%. From what I see in the application, I don't see that it would have any effect on the neighborhood or the environment. It's just an addition alongside the road. Actually, the addition is going to be further from the road than the existing house. The existing house is already 65 and a half feet. This is going to be 77 feet, I think. Yeah, 77 feet from the front line. So it wouldn't encroach the front setback anymore. It'll be fine. So I would make a motion that we grant an area variance for the front line setback in the amount of 23 feet. That's 100 minus the 77.
I was second.
I,
that.
I said,
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. All right, now let's look at. She's going to need an area variance to construct an accessory unit on an undersized lot. In addition to anything we do here, the applicant's going to have to get a special permit from the planning board. The applicant represents that her elderly parents are going to be living in the space, and the applicant does not have any objection to limiting any approvals to her parents living there. If her parents cease to live there, in order to do something with the accessory apartment, she'll have to come back to us and or the planning board if necessary. Under code section 6541, this application requires a special permit from the planning board and an area variance from us due to the fact that the minimum acreage in the RL5 district is 5 acres and the minimum acreage to add an accessory unit is 10 acres. The subject lot is only 4.89. So, let's just see here. Trying to figure out how much of a variance she's we need. I think that she's looking for a variance of 10 acres minus a 4.89. 1, 1, 5. So in other words, we would have to grant an area variance based upon their lot size, which results in 4.11 acres. That would be the variance that should be required to add the accessory unit.
5.5.
5.9, 5.11, yeah. Any second to that?
Yeah, I'll second it.
I had 5.61.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Lastly, let's see here. I don't think we did we need a variance to exceed the 25% expansion permitted by a special permit. It's 73% proposed. She's asking for an increase of 48%. So I would make a motion that we grant the area variance such that it's increased to 73%, which is an increase of 48% over what's allowed by code. Do we have a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Done. I think we ought to add a couple of conditions. In addition to these variances granted, it's conditioned upon the applicant going to the planning board for special permit as required. And it's also conditioned on the accessory dwelling being occupied by her parents, one or both of them. If there's any change to those living arrangements, the applicant would have to come back to us and or the planning board for any permits that may be necessary. Do I have a
I second the motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. You got what you're looking for.
Thank you. I
Okay.
appreciate it. Thank you for your
Thank you.
time. So now I just schedule with the planning board, is that what I do? Because they already have my permit.
I don't know,
What you do, go to the clerk's office when you can, we'll give you an application.
I already filled it out.
Oh, you did?
It's already filled out.
Oh.
They sent me to you. That was where I started.
You start here and then now you go to the planning. board. There's
Okay,
no
so
sense
it's,
going to planning board unless you get a relief from
Right,
us.
so
and
they already
planning
have,
board will notify her.
She's gonna have to appear before the
I'll-
planning board.
I'll reach out to them. They have my
Okay.
application already though.
Yeah, she has to appear before.
Right, no, I get that. She was asking, what's the process?
Okay,
Thank you. Thank you.
you're welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, next one on the agenda is Yadgard. Let's see, this is really quite a long-living project here. Before us, there was an application made, it was duly published. Neighbors were duly notified. A public hearing was held. All parties of interest had an opportunity to submit documentation for or against the application. There are 3 variances sought. At the outset, I just want, in my opinion, we're looking at the criteria for granting an area variance. Regardless of what the town website says, we're governed by state statute and the town code. Some testimony was given before us that the applicant has to establish a hardship before they can make an application. And I think that is only applies if there's a use variance to be applied. There's no use variance here. It's just an area variances that are sought. So under the town code and state statute, there's 5 criteria that we have to look at for each one of the variances. And I think the easiest thing to do is to look at each variance one by one. The first variance is a rear yard setback. The rear yard setback requirement is 75 feet. The applicant is proposing a setback of only 40 feet, which requires a variance from us of 35 feet. Now, the first thing we have to look at is whether there's going to be any undesirable change produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties if we grant the area variance. I think that based upon, in my opinion, based upon the testimony and submitted materials, I fail to see whether there be any undesirable change in the neighborhood. There's already existing pools in the area. Whether or not they need variances to be put in, I think is besides the point, in my opinion. Having another pool in this area, I don't think really changes the character of the neighborhood. Anybody else have any thoughts on it?
The other thought that I had, which would not require for anyone to go to any planning board whatsoever, is, let's just say simply, since we're dealing with kids, we put a play yard and swing set out there that could also make easily just as much noise as kids playing in a pool. In fact, I would think a pool would produce less noise than simply, playground equipment, which could be even potentially used year round.
Yep.
As that was part of the argument earlier, was the activity of children.
Right, right. The other thing that was important to note, I think, is that the applicant has offered to install landscaping and fencing to help protect the neighbors. And I think that the landscaping would have to be in such a manner to be approved by the building inspector, reasonably suited to, protect the neighboring properties. The applicants offered to do that. I think we ought to make it, if it's granted, I think we ought to make it a condition that they also install suitable landscaping approved by the building inspector. The next criteria is whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by any other feasible means. There was some discussion that the pool should be moved to a different location on the property. I think that based upon what I heard and what I read, it would not be cost effective to the applicant to move it. The test is whether it's feasible or not. It could cost twice as much money to move the pool someplace else, but I don't think that's considered feasible or reasonable. What's everybody think?
So I have an opinion with that because even on the initial building, if it was done in a different area originally, obviously without the variances, it could have potentially dealt with the cost and know what you're expecting because pools are expensive. You're going to spend on a pool nowadays anywhere between 100 to 200,000. So when you're making this kind of investment, it's a big investment. So when I think of that, I think, yeah, it's more of the self-inflicted problem with the location itself. And I get both sides. I understand why the Jaguars want. I understand where the Cornells are coming from. It's just what makes sense.
Right. And you've had a fair and full opportunity to review the record and
Absolutely.
everything.
Yeah. I went back and read through everything. So.
Okay. Okay.
And I will tell you, of course, anything's feasible for any amount of money.
Yeah.
But when we were invited to go to the property, this had to be a year and a half ago.
Mhm.
I did go and visit it, and I did not see an alternative place to put that pool because the alternate place that was proposed is in like the driveway comes around and it's in like a rock quarry. And I don't see how you could drill out half your driveway and put a pool there. So to me, there was no other feasible place to put that other than, where the Jaguars proposed.
Right. Okay. Andy, do you have anything to add?
I pretty much feel the same way. I actually went myself just to scope out the property to see exactly what you're talking about, and I wouldn't see another viable place for this.
Okay. All right. The next criteria is whether the requested area variance is substantial. Well, the variance requested is 35 feet. You could think it's substantial, but it may not be substantial since there's really nobody right behind it. I mean, we've had testimony from the Cornells and Mr. Rapelier, but they're on the side. They're not in the rear. I think given the circumstances, in my opinion, I don't necessarily think that the 35 feet is all that substantial. But one of the things I think we have to keep in mind is that we're not required to say yes to every one of the criteria. We have to look at the overall picture of this thing and consider in a way the factors like a balancing test. So, even if this rear yard setback could be close to 50%, I don't see where it's that detrimental in this particular case. Anybody else?
I thought the same thought.
You thought the same?
From the rear yard, yeah, there's really no hardship there.
I concur with Ann. Just I would add also that it's buffered by their garage, on the back side towards that lot line.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Well, that's the side yard.
But that's a side yard, but
Yeah.
also the garage also
Right.
sort of cuts off
Yeah.
the.
See, originally, the applicant was looking for a variance for the side yard for the pool equipment. And in order to mitigate what he was looking for, he withdrew that variance request. So we're only looking at front yard, rear yard, and lot coverage. He's taken away the side yard variance request from the Cornell side.
Yeah, I just, overall, this is just such an unusual condition for, where these two homes are.
Yep.
So.
No, especially outside, yeah.
They were built kind of right next door to one another. And from the rear yard, I don't see any hardship or any sort of a reason we wouldn't grant that.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind too is the applicant reduced the size of his pool so that the rear yard setback was less than what he originally wanted to do. I think he's reduced it to 522 square feet, the pool. It was larger than that with the original application.
Mhm.
The next criteria is whether the proposed area variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or zoning district. Well, as I said before, there are other pools in the area. I don't see how another pool is going to be a detriment to the neighborhood. I know one of the submissions by Mr. Rappier, he has half of the Cornells included an appraisal. I forget the name of the appraiser, but they claimed that Cornell's property would be reduced, the value would be reduced by 15%. But I looked at that appraisal again, and I couldn't see where the appraiser quantified how the 15% was arrived. It was just sort of like a blanket statement saying, oh, the value is going to be decreased by 15%. If there was a rationale for it, I didn't see it in the appraisal itself. So without that quantitative information for us, I didn't think that the appraisal was that persuasive. What's everybody else think on that? That's just my opinion.
Yeah, it seemed pretty arbitrary to me, and honestly, what your neighbor does is gonna affect the value of your property anywhere.
Right.
Someone parks their, fixing their pickup truck in front of the lawn and you're next door.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind too is the applicant's going to
diminish
do
the value.
landscaping. They've agreed to do landscaping that will help shield them from the neighbors. And I think with adequate landscaping, and even if they can use some native species, if appropriate, would probably turn out to be kind of nice.
Yeah, I don't see any significant diminishment in property value
Right.
to the neighbor.
Yeah. And the last one is whether the alleged difficulty is self-created. Certainly it is. There's no question about it. But I think the thing to keep in mind is that self-creation is not determinative of whether we should grant or deny the variance. I think we have to look at all the 5 criteria factors as a whole and use a balancing test to try to figure out whether we want to grant or deny it. All right. Variance 2. They're looking for a side yard setback. The requirement is 100 feet. They're proposing a setback of 90.8 feet, which means they're only looking for a variance of 9.2 feet, which I certainly don't think is substantial at all. But let's take a look at the 5 criteria again. If we grant this 9.2 foot variance, would there be an undesirable change produced in the character of the neighborhood or detriment to nearby properties? It's a minuscule variance that's requested. I mean, it's not even the length of the judge's table. Also, the side yard variance, Cornell's, I believe it's the garage that's closer to the line. I just don't think, looking at that small of a variance, I don't think it's undesirable. There would be any undesirable effects to the neighborhood.
Yeah,
Anybody else?
I feel very much the same way you do. Like I'm looking at where the Cornell's house is,
Mhm.
and the Cornell's house is right on, it appears like very, very close to the property line between the two properties.
Mhm.
So I think the Yagards are in good faith, trying to set back as much as they can from that 100 yards.
Yeah.
It's just,
Especially
it's just
since,
that the Cornells are not
Yeah.
set back.
especially
100 yards,
since
so-
they took away the variance for the pool equipment.
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been
Right.
a real tough variance to grant, but but
But
Yadgard has taken that out of the
Yeah, I mean,
equation.
I think that in the spirit of what they can do, they have met the spirit of the code.
Anybody else?
I agree with you.
Okay.
I don't think a 10-foot variance is substantial.
No.
It's not even a first down.
The next criteria is whether the benefit sought by the applicant can be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue other than an area variance. Well, I think the applicant's been pretty reasonable by withdrawing the first side yard setback that they asked for. That would have been a real substantial variance for the side yard because it was going to be the pool equipment. It could be noisy. There's probably ways to mitigate the noise, but in good faith, I think the applicant was trying to be reasonable in taking away that application for the variance. I just don't, the location of the pool is probably the best spot for it, the way I look at it. Anybody else?
Yeah, as I said, when I went to do my site visit, I agree. It's the only place to reasonably put a pool that
The
has
next,
strength through
Yeah.
the last couple.
And I just think
years.
and the property size itself is 1.76 acres, so it's not a big property and it's a big house, so you're trying to fit something in a tight
Right.
area. And I think if it's a bigger property, I mean, all this goes away. It's just,
got it.
everything's tight right
Yeah,
there.
makes sense.
Yeah.
The next criteria we sort of discussed, whether the requested area variance is substantial. I think that we sort of agreed it's not substantial under the circumstances.
Yes.
Criteria 4, whether the proposed area variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions of the neighborhood or zoning district. As we said before, there's other pools in the area. The applicant has agreed to install landscaping to the satisfaction of the town to help shield and protect any neighbors. The landscaping and fencing would probably be both be required. Even though the Cornells claim the pool installation will negatively impact their property value, as I said before, I didn't think that the appraisal was that persuasive because they really didn't give any quantitative analysis on how it would be a 15% reduction. Anybody else have any thoughts on that criteria?
I agree with what we've kind of all been
Yeah, I
saying,
mean,
even with the rear
there's
setback.
a pool just to the north of, I'll say north, what is that, northeast of the Cornells.
Mhm.
It's probably more, directly sort of in line, and I don't know what the landscaping looks like, I don't know what their plan looks like.
Mhm.
But that pool, to me, looks like it's, more on the side of where they live than where the Yadgards are putting their pool, which is sort of behind the garage.
Okay.
So I just don't see it as having this drive that side yard setback.
Yes,
I just
side
don't
yard.
I don't see it having that much of an adverse effect.
And the last criteria is whether the alleged difficulty is self-created. Sure it is. No question about it. The third variance is for lot coverage. What's required is not to exceed 10%. They're looking to increase that to 12.6%, which means that they're looking for a 2.6% increase. Now, I know that Mr. Rapier had made suggestions that the math is wrong. It was really 26%. But right now, the Yadgard property is non-conforming for 11.9% based upon square footage. When you add 522 square feet for the pool, I think that's only like a 0.07 increase, which brings it up to 12.6. At least that's the way I looked at my math. I don't know if anybody else had any other ideas on the math. I saw Mr. Rappelier's point, but I came at my conclusion differently, by just looking at what they have now and what they're adding. And I think they're only increasing 0.07, which brings it up to 12.6 over the 11.9. So the first criteria is whether an undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood or a detriment to nearby properties, which will be created by granting the area variance. With such a small increase in the existing lot size, I don't see how there could be any undesirable change in the neighborhood. That's just my opinion. I don't know if anybody's got a different opinion on that or not, or what do you think, guys?
I would say overall, it's on the backside of the building.
Yep.
I just don't see this as.
Right.
A major ask.
It's also a very small pool.
It is,
Like
and they reduced the size of it from the original application.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, they reduced it.
Yep. The second criteria is whether the benefits sought by the applicant can be achieved by some other method feasible for the applicant to pursue. Like I said before, the applicant has been trying to mitigate things as much as possible. He even reduced the size of the pool, which reduced his lot coverage. And the increase in lot coverage, in my opinion, is pretty small. If you reduce the size of the pool anymore, it'll be a hot tub. So I don't think that there'd be any other feasible method for the applicant to proceed with that. Anybody?
I would
I
I
agree.
would agree.
I agree.
I don't think it's.
All right, the third criteria is whether the requested area variance is substantial. Based upon my math, with an increase of 0.07%, I don't see how that could be considered substantial at all.
Just,
And even if
it's
it's-
actually 0.7, 0.7.
I misspoke, 0.7.
Sorry.
And even if it was 2.6, it's still very small.
No, it's 0.
No, I understand.
0.07.
I understand too.
Okay.
I think it's 0.7% increase. What'd you say, Tate?
I said it's very minimal, but I said even if it was the 2.6, if you were doing the math the
Yeah.
other way, to me, that still seems very minimal and
Right.
not obtrusive to the
Yep.
property.
Fourth criteria, whether the proposed area variance will have an adverse effect or impact on the physical environment and conditions in the neighborhood. I think it's important to note that the applicant will be required to install landscaping and fencing to the satisfaction of the town. And the intent of that is to protect any neighbors, from the view shed, from even looking at the pool. The applicant has agreed to do all that. I don't see how they could do anything else to help mitigate that. They've reduced the size of the pool, they've agreed to landscaping, they've agreed to fencing suitable to the town. I think that the applicant has agreed to do everything within his power that's feasible to protect the neighbors from having any view shed of the pool. Anybody else?
And didn't they also reduce like the decibel level of the actual pump to make, like, didn't they get like
They're
this?
moving the pump.
Okay, but they did agree to make a quieter
I think
one at one point.
I do remember that, but that's not even before, us,
Yeah, no,
because they
no,
took
I-
away that
I was just,
request for the variance.
Yeah.
And lastly, was it self-created? Of course it was. There's no question about it. I think what we've got to do, I know we went through each of these variances and the 5 criteria. And I think what we've got to do is take a look at each variance, what we've discussed, and use some type of a balancing test to see if the variance is reasonable. If it's not reasonable, do we grant it? Do we deny it? Everybody's got their own opinion. I know Annie, you've had a full and fair opportunity to review all the materials concerning this.
I've read through all
Our
of it.
alternate, Alex,
I've
you've
been
had the
there.
same thing.
And I've been to the property.
So I would suggest that Annie and Alex have authority to vote on this. They're up to speed. Again, we're not required to find each criteria in favor of the applicant. Some of you may feel that something's substantial, some may feel that the self-creation is a killer, but we don't have to be unanimous on each one of the criteria. It's a balancing test. So I think what we'll do first is, let's get seeker out of the way. Under seeker, area variances do not require any environmental review. It would be considered a type 2 action. I would make a motion that we declare this application to be type 2 under seeker. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Let's take variance 1. That's the rear yard setback. Just to remind everybody, the rear yard setback requirement is 75 feet. The applicant is only going to be 40 feet off the line, so he's looking for a 35-foot variance for the rear yard setback. I'll start this off just with my opinion, and you guys can chime in. I would make a motion that we grant the rear yard setback variance in the amount of 35 feet. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Before we do a vote, is there any further discussion? Does anybody have any other thoughts on variance number 1 that we need to discuss or air before we vote? Nothing?
I've said everything.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Motion carried. Variance number 2. That's the side yard setback. To refresh your recollection, the code requires 100 feet. The applicant's pool is going to be 90.8 feet. So he's looking for a variance of 9.2 feet. After all of our discussion, I would make a motion that we grant the side yard setback variance in the amount of 9.2 feet. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. Before we vote, is there any further discussion any board member wants to have concerning this? Any issues, thoughts, anything like that?
No, I think like Andy said, it's an unfortunate scenario where you have 2 properties that are approximately 2 acres and the houses are just both built right kind of on the property line.
Yeah.
So it's a series of
Right.
unfortunate circumstances, but hopefully
Okay.
they get it worked out. But I think that this, 9.2
All right.
feet is minimal.
Yeah, I thought so too. All right, we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
I
Opposed?
I oppose. I don't think, I just think that for this size lot and what is trying to be done there, and living in a village and living on the outskirts, because I've done both, and you move to the town outside for privacy, for quietness, for nature, and people love peace and quiet, and that's just why. So for me, that's,
You're a nay.
I'm a nay.
Okay.
Okay.
Motion carried 4-1. Variance number 3, lot coverage. The code allows 10% coverage. The applicant is looking to increase that to 12.6, which is really an increase. Their existing lot coverage is 11.9. They're looking for an increase of 0.07, but I think that the motion should be to grant a lot coverage variance of 2.6%. Based upon our discussions, I would make a motion that we grant that lot coverage variance. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Any, want to do any discussion on this before we vote? Anybody have any thoughts for or against it?
No, just that part of the coverage is really like in their backyard behind their, whatever it is, kitchen or patio, like it's secluded. It's
Yeah.
not, you can't see it from the road. But, you're not gonna be able to see it from the neighbors.
Okay. All right, those are all good points.
Those are my thoughts.
Anybody else? All right, we got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous? Motion carried. Based upon the discussion and application and granting the variances tonight, I would ask our attorney to prepare a proposed resolution of approval for our review and eventual signature.
The only other thing I'm going to ask is, I know it's mentioned before, but you should probably take a vote on this as well, as to whether or not you want to include the landscaping as a condition of all of the 3 variances.
Good point. Good point.
So perhaps a separate vote on that makes sense.
Yeah, that's,
Fencing and.
yes, all right.
And I'm
In
going to
conjunction-
add, while you're doing that condition, I'm sorry to interrupt, I'm going to also add, since you're adding that as a condition, another condition should be, I would recommend that that the town schedule of fees, the applicant's going to be responsible for the payment of all application review fees incurred by the ZBA in review of the application in excess of the application review fees paid thus far. And that those fees should be paid within 30 days of notification of the applicant that such fees are due. And if such fees are not paid within that 30-day period, or any other extension thereof that's been granted by the ZBA, then the resolution of approval should be considered null and void. And then finally, I would also indicate, I would suggest that no building permit should be issued until those 2 conditions that I just mentioned, payment of the fees and the approval of a screening to the satisfaction of the building inspector.
Okay, I'd make the further motion that applies to all 3 variances that were granted. Condition number 1, that the applicant is going to comply with all conditions of this approval within 6 months from the date of our approval. Condition number 2, the applicant will agree and will do a landscaping plan and fencing for the neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the building inspector, with a view of with a view of protecting any abutting properties from any view shed. Condition 3, that the applicant pay any town fees or consultant fees within 30 days of invoicing by the town. If those fees are not paid within 30 days, any approvals given tonight shall be deemed null and void. Condition 4, no building permit can be issued until the landscaping and fencing plan is agreed to and the fees are paid within 30 days. Once those 2 conditions are met, a building permit can be issued, but not until then. Do I have a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay, that's it, guys. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for coming out.
Oh, microphones.
Motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
I second.
And now that we're done with the agenda, I would make a motion that we adjourn.
I
Second.
Second, yeah.
All in favor? Aye.
All in favor?
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Where do you go?